Grand Rising, Grand Rising. This is Sean Speaks, and I am here today with a special guest. I have Seval Haley from Black Lives Matter, Help Us. Thank you so much, Ms. Sevel, for coming onto the platform. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and thank you for inviting me. How are you this morning?
I am wonderful. I am wonderful. Now, it's kind of funny because we were talking before I started recording. It was supposed to be three of us on this call. I don't know where Kay, my friend Kay, is at, but I hope everything is good with her. And then maybe she'll call in as we proceed. All right. So now, Sevel, I'm gonna be honest with you. This is how I ended up connecting with you. One of my close friends, Kay, the folk woman, she likes to go by. She was having a fundraiser for her birthday, and y'all's organization was the fundraiser. Now, I'm going to be transparent. I saw Black Lives Matter. I did not make the distinction that it was Black Lives Matter, Help Us. I made an assumption that it was just, the big group called Black Lives Matter. And you have enlightened me, and I think that you probably need to enlighten my audience on these different Black Lives Matter organizations. So if you could just kind of help me and help my audience understand, because when I was contributing, I really was contributing thinking it was Black Lives Matter and not realizing that it was a distinction. But I'm so glad that I did, because I got to connect with you, and you've just, made me smarter and more knowledgeable. So help us out with that. Tell us about that.
Okay, well, we'll start with our organization per se, then I'll go into the other ones. Basically,
Okay.
with ours, Black Lives Help Us, we actually are here to help others to grow, learn something new, or achieve their goals and their passion. So we're a nonprofit organization that helps the community from any kind of services, from job placement to educational to in-home healthcare support services to food to shelter to educational needs to ministry. We do everything, and again, we're a nonprofit. And so that's anything from youth to adults to families. We help in any capacity that we can. Now, with some of the other Black Lives Matters organizations, some of those may be nonprofit also, but some may be for-profit. The name itself is basically an umbrella where you can have individual entities, and we're all different. We're not together. We're not the same organization.
Gotcha.
So when you look at the name itself, it's an umbrella of different entities that are separate amongst that name.
Gotcha. Okay, so basically, going forward, when we see the name Black Lives Matter, we need to not make an assumption that it's just this one entity, because it's different.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so like for instance, you're in Texas, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So you guys probably have one that was originated and established in Texas.
I think
that
so.
is Black.
Okay.
So, okay, and then like in California, we have us, which is Black Lives Matter Help Us, and then we have a Black Lives Matter Inland Empire, which is out of the Inland Empire, which is a city perimeter here in California. Okay. And they're Black Lives Matters Inland Empire. So.
Gotcha. And you said, I think when we were talking earlier, you said that there was almost 20 Black Lives Matter organizations in just California alone.
That I've seen just by doing research and looking at different organizations and seeing what's offered. Because my thing is, us as a whole, we've been doing a lot of education through all of this movement. Like you were talking to me prior to this call about your Juneteenth movement and making the awareness this year to making sure people knew what it was and not trying to change the past. Ours is about education. So we actually led a protest, and in our protest, it wasn't for just a march and chant. It was actually to give information of where do we go from here. Knowing who your mayor is, knowing who your chief of police is, knowing who your fire department chief is, so that you have contact numbers when these situations like the Floyd cases is happening, that you're calling somewhere directly on their cell phone, not just calling 911 hoping for help that you may never get, but calling someone and making them accountable for the events that are occurring. So we've actually been educating on that to know that you have a hotline of emergency numbers. And then at that point, if they don't do anything, you can hold them accountable. You're a lawyer. You know, if I reach out to the mayor and I've called him directly, even if I called our governor, Newsom and said, hey, this is going on. I'm standing here watching this man being brutally beaten and no one's doing anything. We've called 911, we're on hold. They have not come out. It's been 8 minutes and 46 seconds and he cannot breathe. At that point, you have someone on the line that they have to do something. And if they don't, you're holding that person accountable. At that point, they're guilty by association.
Exactly, exactly.
And a lot of us don't understand having names and having information is what empowers you. Exactly. You can yell and scream all day and tell someone to stop doing something, but when you're dealing with someone that has hate in their heart or may not be mentally, physically there, or may feel that they were threatened, so they're reacting, they may not be there in a mental capacity.
Gotcha.
So you can't reason with crazy.
Exactly, exactly. So the focus of Black Lives Matter Help Us is really about arming us with the information so that we will know who to reach out to, so that then we can say, okay, are you going to remain silent on this, or are you going to take some action that's going to actually help the situation going forward?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So in the situation, so let's take that. So let's say, for instance, there's a situation where someone is being harassed by the police. What would be the information that Black Lives Matter Help Us would tell somebody to do in that type of situation?
The first thing we would do is you always do your first point of contact, which is the 911, because that's a recorded call. But you know, when most of the stuff is occurring, there's more than one person at the actual scene. So at that point, once you have 911 on the phone and they're telling you stay on the phone, they're talking to you, basically they're keeping you on until an officer arrives, when in this situation, the officers are already on site. There's 3 of them. Yeah. So it's not that we need officers, we need someone to actually interfere and take care of the officers, because they're actually creating that problem. So it wasn't that we needed the officer support at this point, we needed help from what was going on. So at that point, the chief of police, do you know who your chief of police is in your city, in your area? Do you know who your mayor is? So if you call your direct chief of police and you say, Sheriff such and such, and car number 32 has his knee on Floyd's neck and he's not letting him go and he cannot breathe, we're on hold with 911, no one's come out and there's 2 officers observing this. You can see badges, usually you can see numbers. You're reporting this information. Absolutely. And you have their cell phone numbers. Their cell phone numbers is public information, just like their salaries are. Here in California, that's all online. It is public information.
Absolutely. So basically, it's about us utilizing information that's already available to us, but we got to make sure we either know it or have easy access to it on our phone.
Correct. And that we're sharing it. Because a lot of times, yes, a lot of times it's what you don't know that will hurt you. You know, education is power. And a lot of times we don't know our different avenues. We don't understand that by not voting, you're not only giving up the right that your ancestors fought for you to have the right to vote and lost their lives, lost everything for you to have that right. Then you say, I'm not going to vote because I don't like this candidate or I don't like this bill, but you not doing anything doesn't change the situation. So we need to understand the political system. We need to understand the judicial system, not thinking that, okay, just because they may not get convicted in Supreme Court, you can appeal that and go further. We need to be more educated so we know you don't just stop there. You can keep going.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, so now tell me this. Now, let's go back for a little bit. When did you start Black Lives Matter Help Us? When did this organization start?
Well, actually, Black Lives Matter Help Us has been under construction for like the last 5 years. We fully launched it and and actually made it its own entity, separated from its sister company, which is Personal Touch Personnel Service, that we do help job placement and help struggling individuals in the community. So we made it now its own entity. So it's been self-efficient now and flourishing on its own to provide its own support to the community. So now for about 2 years, it's been doing its own thing without any kind of fees, just donations, our time, our own services, and making sure that we give back to the community.
All right, so y'all operate totally off of donations.
Correct.
And then so how can someone get, because you're located in what part of California?
Riverside, California.
Riverside. Now, are y'all just in California, or are y'all branching out basically around the whole United States?
Right now we're in California and on the website, which gives us access to everyone, no matter where you are virtually. But California will stay our home hub area, but with the way things are going now, we have been talking to Betsy Miller-Gaylord, which is the actual founder of the organization,
Okay.
about ways to connect with other Black Lives Matter entities that have the same mission that we have and the same vision, so that we can grow outside of California. And I wouldn't say necessarily us establishing a new entity in a different state, but maybe just joining something else that's already there. Because a lot of states already have their own established relationship. So if we're working together, we'll probably be stronger than working separately.
So what would you say, because I mean, now that I know that there's these multiple different Black Lives Matter type organizations, what are some of the differences and purposes that we as people who want to get involved, we want to know, that we need to know about? If we're saying, hey, we want to help, our community, and sometimes we throw the term out, Black Lives Matter, and we just think we can connect with that organization, but that organization may not necessarily be serving a particular purpose that we're wanting to put our effort towards. Help us to understand, how do we choose which Black Lives Matter organization to support?
Me personally, before I do a lot of my donations or my time or anything that I get involved with, I always make sure I read on it, or I visit their actual website. I see what their actual passion is, what their commitment is, if they're giving significant contributions to society. So that way I can know that they're doing it for the good and for the greater good of the community. So that's a lot of things I do. Now, one thing is I reach out to them too, because some may not just have the funding to go out there and do, because it's hard when you don't have the backing financially. So you may only be able to do minimal things. But once you talk to them, you build a rapport, you see what their vision is and what they're working towards, and you can help them maybe even flourish in it, like how you're doing your broadcast. That brings a lot of awareness that people were not even aware of. So I wouldn't say necessarily discredit them, but I would say making sure that they know what their ultimate mission and goal and purpose is, and that they're staying steady on that. And I would also make sure that one of their biggest things is to know that voting is a very important impact. So before you tell me you're making a change, you need to make sure you understand that you don't just protest, you have to vote. You have to do petitions. Like, there's a lot of other things that are in change. So just not protesting, that doesn't change anything. That makes a voice, makes awareness, but there's a lot more you have to do on the backside of all of this. So
let's talk about that, because we are very good at protesting, and so we do, and protesting can be effective, right? But it sounds like what you're saying, though, is that there's layers to actually having the change that you're wanting to see. And in this society, protesting could be one layer of what we need to do. And voting is another layer. Let's talk about the layers of effective change, so that, we have less of what's been happening, especially in the African-American community, when it comes to police brutality. What are some of those layers, in addition to, protests and voting? What else can we do, or how can all of those things interact together to achieve the change we're wanting to have?
With me, because I actually have a youth group that I'm over through my church. I'm a director of it.
Okay.
So a lot of it, our millennials are so powerful. Our youth will take hold and run with it. So a good thing is embrace them, educate them, put them in charge, get them involved, let them get this message out, because they have a passion. Don't just tell them, oh, you don't understand this. You weren't there when this happened in 1992 to Rodney King. You weren't there in 1928. You weren't there in 1936 when did the March on Washington. No, you're here today, and you see that this is still a problem. It's still happening, that you know that this needs to be changed. So with that, what are you willing to do? Are you willing to get out there and make sure people register to vote? Are you willing to get out there and speak on your social media platform? And not just to your Black audience, not to your Hispanic audience, not to your brown audience, to your color audience of array of colors, because you don't want to make one audience feel like they're not part of this. This is a humanity problem. This is not just a race problem. This is human life. It's not just Black life, this is human life. So yes, Black lives matter because we're human. So our lives matter. So we need to make sure people understand that I'm not saying your life is less than one. I'm not saying blue lives don't matter. My mother is an ex-police officer that organized the actual Black Lives Matter Help Us. At her protest, we had the mayor there. We had the chief of police. We had the sergeant there. We had all the arms there because she's an ex-police officer.
Yeah.
So that's not the problem. The problem is when it becomes a right to see a crime and say nothing. At that point, you're guilty too. So if you're one person and you see someone doing something wrong, or you're 9 people, you said, now you have 10 people that are guilty. So
Wow.
it is awareness.
That's interesting that you say that, because you're right. I mean, we've been sort of kind of conditioned that we will see a crime occur, but because the person that's committing the crime is a man or a woman in the blue uniform, we don't step in. I mean, thankfully we got cameras, right? And you know, so that helps. But we've sort of been trained to see a crime, but because the crime is done by an authority figure, we let it happen. Whereas, you know, we should intervene, but a lot of us don't intervene, because if we intervene, the cop's going to turn on us, and then now we're going to get charged, you know, with the crime for, you know, interfering with police, you know, authority. And so that's sort of that thin line that we have to walk. But in a situation, let's take like a George Floyd, you know, thankfully there's different camera angles, because unfortunately, I always say that one of the things that make George Floyd's situation unique is that it was caught in different angles.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, what makes George Floyd thing unique is that because it was caught in different angles, I think that's why we have the outcry and actual people doing things in response to the outcry. Had there been one part of the story not told on camera, a lot of people would have wanted to justify the police being able to do what they did. But because it was all caught on camera from before they approached George Floyd to his death, it was undeniable that this was police brutality at its worst. And there was no color of authority that people could justify to say that this was right behavior by people that are sworn to protect us, right? And you're right that it's not, when people say Black Lives Matter, people do kind of unfortunately want to come back at you and be like, all lives matter. And it's like, okay, and I always hear this analogy, and I think is a very good analogy. And they say, okay, if you're in the neighborhood and there is one house amongst many houses that's burning down, and you call the fire department. When the fire department comes to the neighborhood, which house do you want the fire department to put out? The house that's burning. Mm-hmm. So that house matters, right? And in that moment, because that house matters, that doesn't mean that your house doesn't matter. In fact, it actually is an indication that your house matters, because we don't want that fire to spill over to your house.
Exactly.
And when you think of it that way, it's like, okay, right now, today, Black Lives Matter because we have been screaming police brutality for so long. We have been screaming that the laws on the books are having a disproportionately, most times, a negative impact on us as a community, and you haven't heard us. Mm-hmm. And to the extent that you have heard us, you've closed your ears up, right? Mm-hmm. Now it's undeniable, and now it's time to change. And before we burn to the point of now burning you, let's fix these problems that we have in this community, right? In our community, let's fix the problem that we have in the way that the government supports this disproportionately negative impact in our communities. So I totally agree with you. Now voting, right? Now help me with the voting, because I definitely agree with you that voting is important. And Ms. Sevel, I will be voting. All right, so don't beat me up. All right, but all right, I'm gonna say something that's gonna be a little bit like, okay, I'm gonna challenge you on that. All right, we have been voting for a very, very long time, and we've been voting probably mostly Democrat for a very, 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 very long time, right? But if I look back over some of the policies that have been put in place, mm-hmm. I cannot deny that some of the most detrimental policies that's been put in place have come under the Democratic regime. I'm not saying all, so please don't beat me up. I'm not saying all. I haven't researched everything, but I'm just saying there's been some things that the Democratic Party has put in place that's really had a detrimental impact on the African American community, but some other minority communities as well. And so voting. So how do we vote? Maybe that's what the problem. Do we go to the voting polls and vote straight Democrat? Do we do that?
Okay, so I'm gonna say something also that doesn't sit well. I didn't become a Democrat until Obama ran for office, is when I changed from a Republican. So
wait a minute, shut up. Wait a minute.
Let's start from there.
Okay, let's start from there.
We're gonna go ahead and pick that one out. So
I'm waiting. Girl, look, I need some tea. Where's my cup? I gotta chew on that notch. Wait a minute. Talk to me now. So
being raised in Riverside County, like I've been raised in the schools that I've attended, I was not in a diverse community. So we were taught to be Republican throughout my schooling. So when I graduated from high school and was time to register to vote and get my license, automatically I felt that I was a Republican, because that is what I was taught. And because of our lifestyle and where we lived and what I saw around me, I fit more in with Republicans. And then when I went away to college, I went to Mississippi College, which is 1% African American and any non-white culture, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing. And then my family being as diverse as they are, it came easy for me to say Republican. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. And eventually, when Obama got ready to run, my husband said, you do understand you can't vote for him because you're Republican, correct? And you like him.
Who didn't like Obama? But keep going.
Exactly, you know, and his wife too, just to see that strong structure. Mm-hmm. I think that's what sold it as a whole too, to see a family foundation and see a woman standing behind the man like it's supposed to be in the Bible. The man is the head of the household, but you have to have a strong woman behind you to have that household stable. Okay. And that to me spoke levels, because that's the traditional Bible right there. Because your husband is supposed to be out in the front, but he can't do it without you taking care of home.
Gotcha.
And you don't have to be in the limelight, but you do have to back that man, you know? So that to me was perfect. I was like, okay, I want to vote for him. I was like, what do I need to do? He's like, you got to change from Republican and you need to do it now. So there's no problem with them saying they lost anything. They didn't change your information or anything. My mom was on the campaign and everything. So I changed and I became a Democrat, and I've been a Democrat ever since. But prior to that, I was Republican.
Okay, so you grew up Republican, and you say you went to Mississippi College.
Yeah.
In Mississippi.
In Mississippi.
Okay, because I'm from Mississippi. I'm from Natchez, Mississippi. That's why I was like, whoa. Okay. All right. So that's unique right there. Just the fact that you went to school in Mississippi, you're Republican. Okay, but that's fine. That just shows you the diversity that exists within us as a people, right?
Exactly.
All right. You were a Republican. Now, I do want to talk just a little bit before we develop that. What were you say that you grew up, you saw around you, what you thought was Republican, so you felt like you had to be Republican. What are some of those characteristics of the things that were around you that you saw, or how you grew up, that made you feel like you identified more as a Republican than anything else?
I'm going to say this, and like I said, we're being very direct, so some people may not like how we're talking about this, but we need to bluntly be honest. One of the things mainly is it was a schooling situation. Okay. Being in the middle class, as they say, that does not exist anymore. When you make over that 100,000 to that 150 to 200,000 range a year as a family, you don't get any kind of Pell Grants or assistance. So then you're looking at putting your kids in debt with student loans. And I was fortunate enough that my parents were like, we're not going to do that. We're going to pay for your schooling any way we can do it. And if that means we're not going to buy the next 5 years of a new car and your tuition is going to be that car payment, then that's what we're going to do. Other families don't have that option. They may be making 100,000, but where they live, they're at their full means to have that nice school district, to have that comfortable living and that good environment for their kids to be raised in. So they may not have that extra $1,200 a month to make a tuition payment. And then you don't have any kind of assistance out there. So then when you vote in these bills that help individuals, they're usually for people in lower income brackets. So then you become a disadvantage, because now you're saying, I want to help people that don't have it, but I can't help people that do have it, because you become privileged, and you're really not. You're trying to make it just like everyone else.
So it's like it's like you're stuck in between, you know, your parents make too much money for the government to help, but really not enough for you to really, because things are so expensive, education is so expensive. And so the parent will have to really make a huge sacrifice to try to pay for your college education, especially depending upon where you're trying to go to college at, right? So because one of the situations, like with me, you know, I grew up in Mississippi. I grew up from Natchez, Mississippi. Woo, back to Natchez. And my, you know, and my parents actually, you know, made, you know, my dad owned his own trucking company. And by the time, you know, my sister and brother would say they grew up poor, right? I always tell people I did not grow up poor, right? I did not grow up poor. All right. I had my first car when I was 15 years of age, brand new. So I did not grow up as poor. I grew up maybe a little different. My brothers and sisters said I grew up different from them. But I understand your situation, because my parents made too much money to get any kind of governmental assistance when I went off to school. But yet at the same time, they really didn't make enough money to pay for the education at the schools that I had chosen. Now, maybe had I chosen a school in Mississippi that was a state school, they probably could have paid for that. But I actually took my, you know, tail to some private schools, and I had to acquire a whole lot of student loans, right? I had about $20,000 in student loans to fund my education. So I totally hear you there, all right? But I guess your point for the Republican thing is that okay, the policies that Democrats would push forward would be policies that will help you stay, and you don't let me put words in your mouth, right? Will be policies that will help you stay poor, right?
Correct.
Whereas the policies that Republicans were pushing out were policies that would help you make more money.
Correct.
Is that a fair assessment of sort of what your thought process was at the time? Okay.
Or like how you said, your family owned a trucking company. My family does too, and owns several other businesses. I was born in Jackson, Mississippi. So we have the race cars, the horse race tracks, the acres of land, the trucking companies, the factories. We have all that.
Yeah.
So when you're a business owner, you want to do policies and bills that help business owners thrive. And that's not usually voted in by Democrats. It's usually Republicans, because they're usually business owners.
Got you. So basically your thought process when you're talking or thinking just economics, it's Republican, and that's just your truth, and that's just what it is, right? And it may be a hard truth for my listeners. It's okay. We're learning how to hold two opposites in our head at the same time. It's okay. All right. But when you're talking about social reform,
correct, and it's Democrat.
Then it's Democrat all day.
Because it's everyone. It's inclusive. It includes everyone. It doesn't exclude anyone. So you're saying everyone deserves health care, not because you make $10 an hour, but because everyone deserves to have better health care so that they can be healthy. And if you're healthy, you can go to work so you can stimulate the economy. So you have to look at that as Democrat. Democrat is supposed to everyone, not just one class of people.
Gotcha. Okay, so I get that. I get that distinction. I think that, you know, a lot of people may be listening. They're gonna have to chew on that a little bit to really understand it. But I think that that's fair. And I didn't grow up being a Republican. I grew up actually being a Democrat. But I do recall my dad saying that he made more money when Reagan was in office. I just remember hearing, that's one of the things that I just remember hearing my dad say. But we were a Democratic family because, the social aspect was more important, I think, than the economic aspect. All right, so now let's fast forward. You grew up that way. I totally understand. We grew up, I think, a lot alike, other than the Republican thing. But now Obama comes on the scene, right? You got this nah guy, you know, with the wife, the powerful lawyer wife with a good family, and you see something that makes you now say, wait a minute, I want to be a Democrat, or in order for me to support that, I have to be a Democrat because I can't vote for him as a Republican, right?
Correct.
And that changed. Now, was it really just that it was Obama and his good-looking family, or did your outlook on life change, where you maybe you moved from the economic focus primarily to a social focus, and that too played a part along with President Obama, or at that time, he wasn't the president at the time this was going on in your head, that says, wait a minute, the change that we want, we can make, and Obama can help usher us into it. What happened?
I would say that it was actually me also becoming a worker in the county system and dealing with less fortunate people. And that was the socialization part too, because I got to see more families that are struggling and things I could do to help them. So that was the beginning of it. And that was part of it. And then him coming played even more into it, because I did change my career from being in accounting and in banking to actually going into social services. So that was another thing too. So then I did see a different socialization aspect of it. But I do think he opened my mind up even more, because his whole message was for change. And it was to make sure everyone was included and it was inclusive. That was his whole message throughout his whole speech.
Okay.
That was everything he brought.
So that penetrated sort of that Republican mind that you had to say, okay, wait a minute, we need to be more about inclusive. And maybe if we get the inclusive right, can we get the economics right for the included people, right? Because to me, that's what it's all about, is right. I want to be social, but I also know that economics plays a part, right?
Correct.
And how do we merge, you know, having a healthy, inclusive social consciousness, but with a healthy, wealthy economic policy that supports all of us, right? Now, of course, I always tell people, I understand that you're gonna always have some people that's gonna be able to make a little bit more money than the other person, right? Especially if we continue with a capitalist system, and I'm all for capitalists. I work for myself, so I have to be a capitalist, right? But at the same time, I do care about making sure that if somebody needs something to eat, that they have food to eat, right? But how do we bridge the benefits of, let's say, the economic policies on the Republican side to the social conscious policy on the Democratic side? How do we bridge and merge those two together?
I think it has a lot to do with what we're going through now. Like you said, when you call out a fire department for the fire, are you calling it for the houses burning, or are you calling it to prevent other houses from burning because the house is on fire? And if you don't stop it, it's going to spread. So it's the same with the economics. If you're trying to make that change and you've made it from where you grew up in Mississippi, and you said your siblings said you grew up differently, but yet you're in the same household, what did you come back and show them that you gained from this to give them that drive and that education to try to get where you're at? Because not everyone has it naturally. Not everyone will have your mindset, your mental capacity, your educational level, but they may have your determination, and they may have your stamina, and they may have your drive, but they may not have your intellect to make the money you make and be a capitalist. But how can you show them that they may have to work harder to get it, because they may not necessarily have the other tools you had, but they can still make it? They may just have to take on a trade. And a lot of people don't understand, trades make just as much money as some people with degrees, if you find the right trade. So it's letting people know that school may not be for everyone, but get into a good trade that you can flourish in. And that's what we do with Black Lives Matter. We show them that if you can't go to school, you're not just lost because you couldn't go to school. Get into engineering, get into a trade, get into something that can still give you that opportunity. You're not just a waste of life.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. You know, I have, several degrees, but I will tell people all the time that, you don't necessarily need a degree to do what you want to do in life. It really depends upon what you want to do. If you want to be a doctor, okay, yeah. The way our system is set up, you have to go through school and take some tests and be licensed to be a doctor. But if being a doctor isn't your passion, and let's say you want to do something that doesn't require a degree, right? Then there may be a trade avenue that you can go that's going to cost less money, right? And be able to produce just as much income, right? So I totally agree with that. So that's interesting. Okay, so now you're a Democrat. You got swayed in by Obama. And
I'll give him the credit only because he was a great president.
Well, it depends now that depends upon who you talk to. Some people,
right? Right.
So I think that depends on who you talk to. But and now you're in an organization, Black Lives Matter, Help Us. So clearly, just from you as an example, if it's about being both economic and social conscious.
Correct.
And I'm so with you, because that's the thing. I'm economic focused. I want to make money, and I want other people to make money, right? But at the same time, I'm social conscious. I don't, believe that, I don't like labels and division and all of that, because I think that we've been perpetuating that, and that's been part of the problem in our social arena, right? But I'm real big on wanting to merge that, right? Because I guess my thing is this: I don't like playing the victim role, right? And so, but it seems like a lot of the times that seemed to be the role as a people we tend to find ourselves in, right? And I think it's because we haven't merged the social with the economic. It's been sort of a divided line. It's like, I want to vote for something that helps me economically, but if I do that, they don't care about us, right? And so I'm gonna end up hurting myself later, right? Because if anything happens where I'm not economically advantaged, unless I become economically disadvantaged, I have very well supported policies that will have a detrimental impact on a good mass of people. But we got to be able to change that, right? And so that's where the protest comes in at. That's where the voting comes at. What most important with the voting? Voting on the local level or voting on the federal level? Where do you have the most impact?
Well, the local level is what makes the changes go to other places. Like, for instance, I don't know if you heard that there's a problem going on right now, that they're trying to pass a bill that you can't videotape police officers. And Arizona is trying to pass that right now. And that's another thing, that if that gets voted in, they're saying that you can't record them. Now,
that would be a bad law to pass. That would be a bad law to pass.
But if it gets passed locally in Arizona, how many other states do you think are going to try to also pass it? It's going to become a domino effect, correct?
So let's talk about that, right? So let's make it clear. All right, Sevel just said that in Arizona, there's a law that's floating around on the local level that's going to make it illegal to video record police officers doing their job. And if you don't show up and go to the polls and vote against that on the local level, right? Now you just allowed a law that to prevent what has really been a key player in the change that we're beginning to see now, which is, I have caught you on tape, cops mistreating Black people for no reason other than the color of their skin, or using extreme force when it wasn't necessary. And if you don't go vote against it, boom, now that law's on the books, and then it can creep into other states on a local level.
Yeah. And see, like, this was actually published, and that's a lot of things too. Before I say things, I make sure I fact check. Okay. It was actually published on June 12th of 2020. And that's when people actually try to bring it up as a bill, because they're saying that sometimes you're recording things and you're not getting all the angles. Like you said in the Floyd case, every angle was covered. So there was no questionable doubt, because that's one of the things when you look at the legal system. Can you actually say without a reasonable doubt that this person is guilty? If you cannot, that's what the difference is between first degree, second degree, and third degree murder. You have to say they had an intention, it was premeditated, it has different conditions before you can even put it to that next level. So it's the same thing with recording something. They can say you're recording it, but you didn't know what happened prior and post. So now you have that reasonable doubt that's questionable now. So
See, the difference, though, I would say to that law in Arizona that they're trying to pass, the problem is that the police always have the default presumption of being right. That's just, it's true in Texas, and I guarantee you it's true in Arizona, and it's probably true in every other state, right? So, and we already know that before the George Floyd situation, there were many instances of cops brutality against Black people or other minorities were caught on camera. And despite being caught on camera, they went to, the few that did get charged and had a trial, the jurors came back and found not guilty. So they already get the benefit of being sort of, right in the right. So the video camera all of these years hadn't hurt them from having a presumption of being right. So why do you need to make a law to say that they cannot be videotaped? Now you're just literally closing the door now, opening the door for them to do what the heck they want to do, which is what they've been doing anyway.
Correct. And now you're also trying to take away my First Amendment right, because that's my First Amendment right too. Exactly. So now not only are you trying to take away something that's in a law already to make an ordinance for, so like I said, the local level.
And with Arizona, there's this new app called Kazoo, right? And it's the whole concept of the app is that you can record yourself in a situation, right? And it will automatically send the recording to your 5 emergency contacts, but it will also upload itself to 911 emergency. So in a situation like that, to me, Arizona doesn't need a law. If you have apps like that if a situation is occurring, I can whip out my phone and hit a button, and that automatically goes to my emergency contact, and the video goes to the emergency contacts. And also the video goes to 911. So now 911 is seeing what police officer, whatever, is doing in that situation, right? To me, you need that. To cut off the ability to be able to record an officer doing his job is first of all, it to me would violate the fact that he's a public officer. He's a public official. Everything else they do is public, right? I can find out what they make. They're in a public capacity, or so yes, you get to get recorded, right? If a mayor goes out and gives a speech, I can record that mayor giving a speech. If an officer is doing his job, the officer should be recorded. Now, do I think you should interfere? Meaning, do I think you should be able to, necessarily go and intervene with an officer doing his job? No. However, given the George Floyd situation, the extreme behavior of these officers in George Floyd's situation, along with others, in my opinion, right? There should be some allowance for civilians to be able to say, okay, officer, that's enough. Right? Correct. That is enough. You've done enough. Because to me, once an officer has a person in handcuffs and you can place them in the car, I just don't understand why you got to go past that point. Put them in the car, they in handcuffs, put them in the car and take them away, right? And then there's some things that need to be just outlawed, right? The knee to the neck, outlawed. Putting them on the ground and sitting on them, outlawed. What do you need to do that for? Especially once you have them in handcuffs already. Now maybe I get it. You trying to get them in handcuffs and they're kind of battling with you. You got to get them in handcuffs. But once you get them in that handcuffs, to me, you don't need to put your knee in their neck anymore, right? So we definitely need to make sure that bills like that don't get passed, because those are those bills that you think are not that important, right? That election that you think, oh, I'm not going to vote in that. But that's critical. Then it passes, and then all of a sudden you go to do something and you get in trouble. You'd be like, why can't I record? Well, you didn't vote in the election in the fall, and because you didn't vote, that law passed, and now you can't record an officer doing his job.
Exactly. And yet they're supposed to wear body cams. So how are you saying recording is illegal when they should have body cams anyway?
Well, because I think that to me, whoever propose that bill is telling you their heart.
Yes.
And in my opinion, you know, I'm not in Arizona, but to me, I would look to find out who proposed that, who, first of all, who wrote the bill, who thought of the bill, who helped to write the bill, and whoever those parties are need to be voted out. Because
Okay.
you just disclosed your heart.
Correct. So it's an ordinance, and it's 11746, and I've been doing research on it, so I want to do even more research on it. And like I said, it goes into basically taking away your freedom of speech and your First Amendment rights when you're saying that you can't record. So it's 11746, and it was actually originally done on April 21st, 2020. So
if you're watching this podcast and you live in Arizona, you need to really, really, really research. In fact, I need to research it too, because this person you never know, whoever these people are going to probably try to have higher aspirations to be more than just a local politician. Because to me, that shows your heart, right? Because now you want to prevent, because without the angles from George Floyd, we wouldn't have what we have now. We wouldn't have these changes. Wait a minute, I see Kay. Wait a minute, is Kay coming on?
Yep.
Is Kay coming on? Hello there, Kay.
Hey.
Yeah.
Grand Rising.
Grand Rising.
Hey, Grand Rising. Greetings, Seval. How are you?
Well, good. And yourself?
Doing great, doing great. My folks just got into town yesterday, so they needed help with their businesses. They have a Black-owned boutique in Grenada, Mississippi named Sunday Best. I was helping with the website and helping my dad with doing research. So like 5 this morning. So I thought, hey, I'll just take a quick power nap. No, it's like straight to the alarm.
You slept straight to the alarm. That's okay. Well, welcome to the platform, Miss Kay Wolfe. How are you?
I'm doing great, LaShawn. You're looking fabulous.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, you caught us we were just in this discussion. We were talking about this Arizona ordinance that's somebody has proposed to become an ordinance that says it would be basically illegal to record officers in carrying out their duties. And we were kind of talking about, you know, if how important it is to vote on the local level, because if you don't vote on the local level, this proposed ordinance 11746 in Arizona could pass into law if you don't show up to vote. And so, and I was saying that whoever basically drafted this ordinance and came up with this ordinance, you need to put your eye on them, because they just showed you their heart, right? Because that means that they want officers to have the capacity to break the law and not be called on it, right? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, what other purpose would there be behind going several steps back? You realize, oh, that gives them too much power. Oh, these body cam videos done started a movement. Uh-oh, let's step back.
Step back,
Let's retract the power, that level of freedom in order to maintain a status quo that's being shaken up right now.
Exactly.
And I agree with what you're saying. You find out who it is and get them out of office.
Yeah, I mean, I don't live in Arizona, but I'm sure that I have somebody that's going to be watching this podcast that live in Arizona, that knows somebody in Arizona. And I think it's bigger than just Arizona, because if they're bold enough to write a law like that and try to have it proposed, because I'm sure that they're proposing it as if it's for safety precautions, right? You know, these particular politicians, you never know, they may want to run for a higher office. So now they're no longer lower. And so I need to know what your heart is, because to me, this proposed ordinance 11746, if you're saying that, hey, now I can't record an officer doing a misdeed, that's a problem. That is a problem. And so what, you know, one of the things that Chevelle was saying as one of the layers to the change we want to see, voting is that layer. And on that end, I think voting, she's absolutely right, because a lot of times we don't care that much about the local stuff, but it's the local stuff that actually matters the most.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. There is a large misconception, large level of ignorance in the population in our community that the most important vote is the presidential vote. And even still, not just the most important vote is the presidential vote, but there's also the, well, our vote doesn't even really matter because ultimately we don't decide.
Yep. We're not the masses.
important vote is the local vote, because you're voting into office. You have the power to vote into office. Who ultimately decides the presidency? Because number 45, the collective of the United States, did not vote number 45 into office.
that's true.
He's like one of five presidents who was not elected by popular vote. He was elected by the Electoral College, meaning the people who had a more minority mindset had the power of the majority because they voted for the folks in the Electoral College that put 45 in the president's office. So
Yeah.
and you know, when you do your local level voting, you also have an option to voice your opinion for laws and how money is going to be used in your community. Laws that affect you directly that may not affect you, Seval, for instance. You're in California, I'm in Georgia, LaShawn, you're in Texas. So our local voting ballot looks totally different when it comes to making selections for, you know, hey, what do we want to do about legalizing marijuana in our state? What do we want to do about, I think Oregon just passed a law to legalize psychedelic mushrooms, right? So go vote at your local level, because that impacts your everyday living significantly.
Yeah.
It does. And like
Where the dollars are going to go for, you know, are we going to put more money in prisons or put more money in the education system? Are we going to fix these roads that you drive every day? Or are we going to focus more on putting money in a shopping, or setting aside money to build up a shopping mall? You know, there's a lot of decisions to be made at the local level. And I think that educating yourselves on when the election, or educating ourselves collectively on when those election dates are, and find your local polling place, you know, just go and show up.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
And like you were saying, so what do? A big part of it is I really wish that we had a liaison for every state, that we set up in every state, every city, every county, someone that would organize and get the message out there. So if we have elder people that can't make it to the polls, we get them signed up for their votes to be by mail. We just have to make a change now. We have to step up. And in the churches, you know, church is a big thing in the brown, Black, Hispanic culture. That's like our foundation. Church is very, and I don't care what kind of church it is. It could be home church, it could be your sanctuary, whatever it is, we're rooted on the spiritual and nature aspects of coming into harmony with who you are. So however way you go about it, if it's not the traditional Jesus and Christ and God, it may be, you know, you going into the essential medicine. I don't know, whatever it is, we all have some kind of way, but getting that message out to each entity so that you know, okay, look, let them know this is the date to vote. This is how you do your mail-in vote. Educating. And I think our biggest thing is, like with us here, Black Lives Matters Help Us, we're reaching out to those communities, those churches. And they have a lot in the Baptist churches. They have older Black, you know, people that don't feel that they make a difference because they've been systematically told that their vote doesn't matter. And so if you tell one person that, they tell 9 more, and now you got 10, you times that by 10, you got 100 people that don't vote.
And it's the non-voting that actually makes sure your vote not matter, really. Your
Exactly.
non-voting is what makes it not matter. Because we're not voting on the things that will have the most impact on us, right? And so that's definitely, voting is definitely critically important. But also also understanding what's being put on the ballot, because one of the things that I've noticed, and you know, in voting here in Texas, is that sometimes something can be on a proposition, can be put on the ballot, and it could be worded one way when I'm in that ballot booth, right? I'd be like, oh yeah, that's a good idea, right? And you know, granted, I didn't look at every proposition before going in there, right? You know, I had a little cheat sheet. Sometimes I try to, one of my friends is in politics, and she'll send something, and I try to send it off to people. You know, it'd be kind of like this is kind of how we, depending upon your views, of course, how we should vote. These are the things we should vote for or against based upon what the policies are. But every now and then I'll go in there and I'm looking at a proposition and I'm reading it on the ballot, and it sounds good. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. Just to get home later and look it up more and be like, wait a minute, I wouldn't have voted for that. But they tricked me in the wording of the way they put it on the ballot. And so we definitely, you know, I think having sort of organizations that, you know, their purpose is, you know, to let you know where the voting, you know, booths are, voting polls are, et cetera, but also to interpret in very simplistic terminology, this is what Proposition 1 is. This is what Proposition 2 is. And also give people
In layman's terms.
In layman's terms, and also put it in context, right? If you vote for Ordinance 11746, because I guarantee you Ordinance 11746 is called Protecting the Police or something like that, right? I guarantee it's named something like that. Well, who would? I mean, I'm gonna vote for anything that protects my police, right? If you just tell me that's the blurb, I'm gonna vote for that, right? I'm not against police, I love police, right? So I'm gonna go for that. And I'm gonna go vote yes for that law, not having actually either read it or understood the impact of what that law or that ordinance is gonna do. And so having, you know, people in place that could say, okay, hey, these are the things that's coming up on the ballot. And in simplistic terms, this is what it means. And in context terms, this is the potential effect. So we're not telling you how to vote. We're telling you this is how to understand all of that gibberish language that politicians and lawyers like to put on there that sounds very flowery, but you don't really understand what it means, right? And so I actually agree with you, Sevel. I think having sort of we've got to become more intentionally strategic in making sure we understand and we make sure that we understand the action that needs to be taken, right? And that comes from knowledge, right?
Power, I'm telling you. And what we share to each other, we have to make sure when we learn things, we're not keeping it just to our own. We are sharing it to the masses. Like you said, you may put it on your social media when one of your friends is giving you information on an actual proposition. We all should be doing that.
Yep.
And that way, if they need more clarification, giving them someone that they can go to for a lifeline to get more clarification. Because for me, I got to vote for the first time in 94. I'm going to give you my age now. That lets you know when I was 18 in 94 was my first vote. So one of the first things I voted on was the 3 strikes law. I will never forget that. Because the way it was presented to me, if someone's a sex offender, they've gotten off 1 or 2 times. If they get picked up that 3rd time, they're getting life. So me being a young 18-year-old, I'm like, yeah, a pedophile needs to go to jail forever. Like,
wow, that's how they worded it. And they didn't mention that, oh, by the way, that's for everybody, 3 strikes.
Exactly. You steal a piece of candy, you're going to jail for life because you're on your 3rd strike.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you. I mean, I think that to me is one of the, you know, but to go back to our discussion before Kay got on here, that's a Democrat thing. That's a Democrat thing, right? And because we're so, you know, Democratic committed, you know, we really don't understand that not all Democratic policies are really to our benefit, right? Because you're right, they worded that in a way that, you know, that it's like, yeah, yeah, 3 strikes. I always tell people, and maybe it's because it's the lawyer in me, right? You know, and I'm extreme, and I know some people are like real upset with me, but you know, I'm extreme, I guess, maybe. You know, but I just think when you go to jail and you do your time and you get out, I just don't think you should have labels that follow you, right? I think that if somebody's gonna, and I know y'all may disagree with me on this, but this is just the reason why I say that is because I've seen people, I've had situations where the particular charge should come with a sex offense for life registration. But because I may have been either intimately familiar with the case, or I know the person, I know the situation, and it's like, that person should not wear that label for the rest of their lives. That's crazy for that situation. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that, you know, it's one of those things, and I get that we want to identify people who may not have rehabilitated, right? But that to me is why it should be more a rehabilitation process, right? You either keep them in jail, put them through programs, but let's not just slap a label on them, because I don't know if that really fixes anything or actually resolves the problem, right? And it's just like if somebody is a felon, right? If somebody went to jail and a felon and they can't vote, why should they not be able to if they've done their time, right? If they've done their time, if you say this crime, you know, let's say you either did a deal or you had a trial and you got 10 years and you did your 10 years and you come out, why can't people come out with a true clean slate? And meaning the clean slate is this: I did my 10 years. You already gonna have a problem in the job market anyway, because how you gonna explain what you did for 10 years? So you already got that big old gap. But we further make that gap harder by now labeling you as a felon, right? And then a lot of great jobs are not gonna hire you because you're a felon, right? And you know, so you have these, to me, these situations that if you look at, that then has a disproportionately negative impact on who? African Americans and minorities, right? So it all plays a part. So, you know, so I think you have to go back to that juxtaposition of the social policies and the economic policies, right? The social policy of all inclusiveness, yes, that's what the Democrats are for, but some of the policies that they put in place really do have a negative impact on African Americans, y'all. That's just facts, right? So give me some feedback. I challenge you, y'all.
Americans as well, yeah.
Yeah, and
Indigenous
that's a big thing. Yeah, because that's one of the things here in California we actually brought up, and it was a local thing that we've changed the way the voting system is, that some felons can vote now. That if they're not currently serving a sentence and they're not currently in prison for a felony. So those were things that we found that were issues with the voting system here that we had changed. So that's on a local level, because it's in California. Yeah, so I don't know if other states, but that's something other states may want to look into, because now you're not giving someone a second chance to be a positive person in society, because now you're limiting what they can do in society. So how are you giving them a second chance if you're saying you're not really part of society?
Exactly. And you're making their life after jail even harder, which is why they usually repeat to go back to jail. Because if you're making it where they cannot get a job, if you're making it where they cannot feed their family, they've already been gone for 10 years, right? They're gonna have a hard enough time finding a job. Let's not make it even harder by putting a label on them, right? But those changes have to be made on the local level. So that is the reason why the local level is very important. But we got the layer, we got the protests, we got the voting. But Kay, I think you mentioned something when you came in, you dropped the nugget as soon as you came in. Let's talk about how the mindset play a part in all of that, right? Because to me, it's the mindset that sort of weaves it all together, right? So
yeah, consciousness, perception that damned if I do, damned if I don't, I'm just not going to do it. And then if you factor in other social factors of like maybe the challenges with access to a polling location hours, you know, we've got families that are marginalized families and maybe don't have childcare to, you know, I'm thinking about the challenges that I faced when it's voting day. And just so like over the past 10 years, you know, my daughter's 9 now, she'll be 10 in September, but on voting days, you know, am I scheduled to work at that time? If I'm not scheduled to work, you know, my child, is she healthy? Is she sick? Can I go take her out in public and go stand in line for hours to go vote? Thinking also, well, what's going on with the poll location? I think my polling location has changed 3 times over the past 10 years. So, you know, driving up to a place and, oh, what, they're not, I can't vote here anymore. Like, what happened? Why did I get that? You know, they have to get on the phone and do the research. Well, if you're in that situation, do you have a cell phone that has high-speed internet that's capable of, you know, doing the research on the fly like that? I know
do you care to even do the research? Is your mindset such that if you get that, because a lot of times if you get a barrier put in front of you, sometimes depending upon what kind of mindset that you have, you won't reevaluate to see how can I either go around this barrier, go over this barrier, or go under this barrier. Sometimes they put these barriers in place so that, because I think they really do bank on us having a weaker mindset, right? Meaning that we're not focused, we're not determined, we're not, you know, committed to having that change that we're really wanting to have in life. And so let's say they make the polling locations difficult to find. Do we have to develop the mindset to say, okay, you know what, if I go to this polling and it's not open, that's all right, I'm gonna go to the next one, have that determination? Is that kind of what you're kind of getting to as far as how that impacts your people's mindset?
Right, that's another thing, is, well, I've just hit a wall. Is it worth it? Am I gonna keep going and persistent so that I can find where I'm supposed to go vote now? There's definitely a lot of distractions in our society. I've encountered people in our community that can tell you everything about what happened in Nene Leakes in the past 5 years of her career, but, you know, can't tell you when the last time a vote for some major legislative change occurred in the past 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the entertainment distraction, the constant mental barrage, is happens in our community as a relief from the stresses of everyday life.
Okay, I'm glad that you said that, a relief from the stresses. Okay, so I think that could be the result of when you feel like life is constantly bombarding you with negative things, right? And you always feel like no matter what you're doing, you're gonna lose, right? You know, we've been trained as a people, not every person, but as a people, to really be the victim in society, right? We've been trained to you know, to have, we play that victim role a lot, right? Now, that's not to say that it's not necessarily sometimes not justified, but what do we do? How do we move from, you know, from the victim role to the victor role, so to speak? How do we move from there? All right, so I think I was asking a question about, you know, how do we go from victim to victor? How do we as a people go from victim? We can't change. I think me and Sevel was talking about this before we got on recording. I can't change what happened in the past. That's the reason why I celebrate Juneteenth. I'm not ashamed of it, right? Because I can't change that there were a lot of my forefathers that didn't know that they had been made free, right? I'm not ashamed of that. I actually embrace that. I transcend it because the reality of it is that no one could have actually made them free anyway. They were already free, right? that was a system that they were in that halted their freedom for a period of time, right? Because you had some of our forefathers back then, they may have been quote unquote enslaved, but they were never enslaved in the mind, right?
Mhm.
And so, you know, so it's about embracing what the truth was. Because just because that was the truth doesn't mean it is the truth. So how do we go from being victims to being victors?
That's a big question.
It's a huge question, and there's a lot of different, you know, I can narrow it. Let's narrow it. How do we go from victim to
I
victim?
would like to take it on the educational level,
Let's
and
do
I'm
that.
going to take it on I'm just going to tiptoe on it. I'll let you guys take it on a bigger.
No, don't tiptoe. No, I'm ready to choose some stuff, child. Let's go deep,
Okay.
go deep.
Well, I'm going to start it on the educational level, because
Great.
a lot of us do not realize when we buy real estate and buy homes,
Okay.
you do it based on the schooling and the actual safety of the community, correct?
Okay.
All of us don't look at that as a factor. We look at whether or not we can afford living where we buy, correct? So now you may put your kids in a school district that's not giving them a chance to survive in the society we live in, that they can't even pass an exit exam to get out of school, that they go from elementary school that may be a 10, and now they're going to junior high school or middle school, however you guys call it in your state. They may now be in a 5, and then they go back to a high school that's a 7, so they're going to fail because they haven't learned the importance of education and what they need to exceed in high school, because now they're in a lower academic school. So what I share with a lot of people, because like you said, for us to move out of the victim role, we have to educate each other, right?
That's right.
And if we don't educate each other, we will never not be a victim, because people will tell you all the time that the cards are not stacked against us. And I have to beg to differ, because I have people that come from different walks of life. So when they used to tell me that, I'm like, no, that can't be true. But then I start looking at that if they live in the projects or they live in community housing or apartment complexes, those schools are usually a 2 out of 10. So are those kids really getting the same academic advantage that my kid is getting that goes to a school that's a 7 or 9? No. So they're not even getting the elements they need to succeed. So then they go to college and they're struggling. So they end up dropping out of college because they feel like they can't do it. They're a failure. So one of the websites I've been sharing to just enlighten people, because that's one of the biggest things I think we need to do, is educate each other.
Okay.
I tell people now, go on greatschools.org. If you go on greatschools.org, you can put in every school that's in your area, and it will tell you where they rate from 1 to 10. So you'll see that a lot of your schools in the predominantly brown areas or colored areas or culturally diverse areas, they only rank a 4 or a 5 out of 10.
And that's based upon, of course, property values for most states. In Texas, schools are based upon property values, right? The higher priced your houses are, the better the schools are. But how do we change that? Well, other than, okay, one is we could change that. Instead of schools being based upon property values, we just have an allocation of that all schools should educate the same.
Why should you get a better education because you can afford a $1.5 million house and I can only afford a $500,000 house?
Because I think we buy into division. We buy into label divisions, right? Because, you know, you want to be able to say that, these are the Ivy League schools. These are the lower part schools, or these are these kind of schools. I think we perpetuate that because label sounds good until you are negatively impacted by the label, right? Because the reality of it is, it really, being that we were the ones that created the problem as far as education being tied to property values, it would be a very easy fix. Let's just untie education to property values. And let's allocate, if we got $10 million towards education and we got 10 schools, then it's $1 million per school. And that way we are basically making sure that all of the resources, the good teachers, the nice buildings, etc., are there, right? Wouldn't that be isn't that an easy fix? Or am I just being delusional?
I think it's an easy fix, but then it goes back to how we spoke earlier on socialization and economics. Is someone really going to be willing to take that money and take a chance that their kid may get less now, that they feel their kid is entitled to more because now you're giving to a lower masses?
Now what they do is then they go build a private school and they send their children to the private school.
Well, okay, let's take it there, Kay. Okay, let's say they do that.
They
But that's a
want to
private
hire
school.
up teachers from those public schools, the top teachers. They want to take them and put them in the private school.
Okay, but let's say that they do that. So let's say all schools, as far as public schools, are allocated an equal division of the money, right? And then if if you're mad that you used to could have the school that had all of the luxuries because it was based on property value, and you went and took your kid and went to a private school, that's your right. You can do that, but we still can have the effective public school, right? Because the private school can't house all the great teachers, right? Talk to me. Couldn't we fix that problem? I guess this is my thing, y'all. And Kay probably done heard me bicker on this. Sevel, you just meeting me. I get very frustrated when we focus on problems that are easily solvable. You do realize we created these problems, right? So I always have to take the quote from Albert Einstein. We have to, we can't solve a new problem with the same mind that created it, right? If we created the educational system, which a lot of America's educational system was based in producing people for the assembly line, right? It was an industrialized based society, educational system. That's just facts. Look it up, right? But now, that's not that's not the majority of our industry now, right? So it's time now to adjust the educational system. Why can't we just adjust that educational system? Because someone thinks that they're going to lose. Is that why they won't say, okay, you know what, let's just change it? Education will not be based on property values. It'll be based upon a equal allocation of resources per child per school.
And do you really think it's just based on property value, or is it based on now that we can divide amongst individuals? We can now say that I am superior to you because I'm at this level and you're here.
No, I agree. I think it's both. But I think it starts with it's easier to start the division with the property values, because if I'm not, okay, first of all, we're already, as African Americans, we're already sort of behind the 8 ball, so to speak, economically. We just are, right? So that means that when it comes to choosing neighborhoods, we're not going to be able to choose necessarily the River Oaks of the areas, right? So we're already behind 8 ball economically. So now when we go to our neighborhoods, for the most part, we're in neighborhoods that are not, quote unquote, the River Oaks of the city. We're in a lower level neighborhood, right? But the division is caused by, okay, I guess what I'm trying to say is, that's true that it's the superior mindset, but we can still fix that by just allocating the resources equally if it's a public school, no matter what your address is, right? Forget the fact that you live in River Oaks. If you got a public school in the River Oaks area, then everybody can go. Maybe that's the fix. So instead of saying I can only go in a school that's zone 2-3 miles to my house, I can go to any school that's in my particular city or county. Mm-hmm. What about that? Would that be a fix?
That would be one of them. That's kind of like the thing they started here. I don't know if you guys have it, No Child Left Behind, trying to give every child the opportunity to have the same education.
Yeah, in Georgia, they have a charter school lottery system. So, and there's also, I cannot recall the name of the program because I haven't used it or had to use it, but I came across it many years ago, and it allows a child to, or family to move their child to a different school that has better opportunity than the school that they're zoned for.
But see, that's the part of my understanding. Why a
Trying to
school with better opportunity? Why? Why should one school have a better opportunity than another school? If it's a school and it can pass the certifications and it's been authorized by the government, the people who are in control, all schools should provide a great education. It's not that difficult. Okay, you know what? Maybe it's just me, right?
Oh no, because shouldn't, well, I'm seeing your point, because aren't all the teachers have to have the same degrees that are teaching at these schools?
Exactly.
So why is the education system different if every teacher has to have a degree to teach you?
Exactly.
So you're not saying that they can have a high school diploma. You want them to have a degree.
You want them to have a degree. Exactly.
So now
You're
why?
looking at money for when you're looking at a rating, you're also considering, does the school have funding to have a science lab? Does the school have funding to have a planetarium or get dissecting kits for first graders? There's a lot to consider in the way of the budget for that school based on the property taxes coming into the revenue stream, right? So, for instance, when I was in, I went to I spent some of my elementary school years in Dallas, Texas, where I was born, and also attended school in Sterling, Virginia. It's a nice suburb, like 20 minutes outside of DC. I had computer labs. And then when my family moved to Georgia, no computer lab. Like, it just blew my mind. I was like, where are we? What planet have we landed on that the school can't afford or hasn't had the forethought to install a computer lab? So,
so see, to me, that goes back to mindset then, because I understand that there's some people that are quote unquote smarter than other people, maybe, right? I can debate that, but just for sake of terminology, I get that there may be
everyone's smart in a different way.
Yeah, smart in a different way. That's why I say I had to put it in quotes, because I don't think any one person is really smarter than another person. I think, but okay, so I get that, you may go to school with a teacher that'll go out the way to really present the material in a way that you can understand, right? Mm-hmm. And so thereby you may get a better education simply because you had a better teacher, right? Those differences I get, and that's not a lot that we can really control on that area, because I may be a better, math teacher than Kay, right? But Kay may be a better science teacher than Seval, right? So I'm not talking about those differences. Those differences I'm not quite sure we can fix yet. I'm still thinking about it. I'm talking about the difference when people say, well, I moved to this neighborhood so that my child could have a better education, because if I would move to that other neighborhood, that school would have been subpar. I'm talking about that problem. That should not be a problem, because the minimum
like standardized level of education for all schools, a standardized level of supplies for the school and resources.
At least a minimum, right? At least the minimum.
It's just not gonna happen.
But okay, I don't disagree with,
the way the system's designed,
it's designed to hold people back.
It's designed, okay, that's really what I was getting at.
It's designed for that. Just like it's not designed for everyone to stay alive. We have to have the actual life cycle so people can die, so that we can have more people on Earth, because if not, we're going to be overpopulated.
Okay,
all
so
this is actual design.
I'm about to be really messy now. So if that's the design, then could it be that as a people, we're just designed to be the weight bearers of this society? And we should be okay with that, the role of being the weight bearers? We should be okay with the role of being the victim? If it's just designed.
Look at the demographic.
If we play no part in being able to change it, shouldn't we just be satisfied? I mean, I'm asking a question because when we start to say, well, it's just the way it is, it's never going to change, and you're saying that some things are automatic, some things are permanent, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
If it is permanent, then is our role permanent?
No, the role's not permanent. The role is, I mean, as soon as a person makes up her mind to change her internal programming, you know, say a woman that's, I think you missed that whole story I was telling about delivering food yesterday
Mm-hmm.
to some families that live in the extended stay across the way. And say one of the mothers there decide to change her perception, have a existential shift, change her paradigm, and she decides, you know, actually I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live in this extended stay suite and have my children, you know, living in close to squalor, you know, in this one, you know, I think they have like 6 people in this one room. It's just 2 beds and a mini fridge, a microwave, and sink, and a bathroom. Like, that's it, you know. Maybe she decides, I'm going to do, or I want to change this. I don't want to live like this. I want my child to have a bright future, and I want my child to have a better chance at success. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to change this, and I'm going to change by any means necessary. And say she decides to, then it's once she has that, oh, I want to change, then she starts to research and look at the options. Okay, well, where can I, from where I am right now, with what I have right now, what can I do? Is there an action? What actions can I take to change the circumstance? And then she, you know, starts to research, looks at her options. She might decide, hey, we'd be better off living on a plot of communal land up in the mountains than living in this 1-bedroom hotel room, motel room. And then, so when she decides to do that, then she takes action to mobilize her efforts. It all starts here, having that realization that there are other options besides, oh, well, if I want to live like this, I gotta have a bunch of money. If I want a bunch of money, I need to have a better job.
But Kay, I'm agreeing with you.
Like
I agree with that. But that goes back to what I was saying earlier. If we know we have a problem, and it was our mind that created the problem, we created this sort of caste system where, depending upon the price of a house, depends upon the quality of the education. And I'm saying with that same, we can, with a different mind, we can change that. We can just say, okay, the fact that you live in $1 million house will have no actual impact on how good that particular school is in the neighborhood, right? So, or the fact that you live in a $30,000 house won't have any impact upon how good the school is, because the schools at a certain base level will have what's needed to become a productive citizen in this America. We could fix that, right? But it sounds like the pushback is, well, society's not going to go for that, right? Society wants to have the differences of the superior, the inferior, right? And that's just how it is. And what I'm saying is that if that's the mindset, if that's just how it is, it's got to be a superior, it's got to be an inferior, then why do we have such a problem with the role as a group, not us necessarily individually, but as a group that we've played in a society, if we don't play a part in making those changes? I guess what I'm saying is that we play a part in making those changes, but it starts with what you just said, Kay. You got to have a mindset change. Otherwise, you'll find yourself playing the same role, right? Because this is the thing. This is one of the things, when I was looking, me and my husband were looking for a house, we didn't even think to look in a Black neighborhood. shame on us, right? And the reason we didn't think to look in Black neighborhoods because we wanted our kids to go to a good school, right? And to go to a good school means we wanted to go out to the suburbs and pick a school district that will have more good schools available depending upon our address, right?
Yeah.
So
A lot of parents do that.
a lot of parents do that. So then what happens to the communities that we did not go to, that we didn't take our dollars to? What happened to those schools in those communities? Right? I'm saying let's remove that as a possibility and let's change how we fund schools. It's an easy fix, at least minimally anyway, right? So that the experience that you had, Kay, of having a school that had computers and a school that didn't have computers, you would never have to experience that, because at a minimum, you should not be going to a school today that don't have computers.
Well, that's another, I mean, I see what you're saying, but you know, then the challenge with back in the 80s, 90s, not everyone was aware of the importance of computers. For instance, I have my daughter in a private school, the first few years of her schooling, and they were teaching the children how to code. And then when I put her in my local public school, they didn't do any coding, even at a higher grade level. Like, she was coding in kindergarten. And then at this public school, it's like, coding? What coding? And then, you know, it's a matter of, gosh, it's a multi-layered cake. I'm trying to put it all into concise words and it's escaping me. But
Well,
if
I
the
think
people at the administration at that public school, if the education board for this county don't have the foresight to think, oh, we need to be teaching children computer coding as early as possible. If they're not thinking about that, you know, in my case, if state of Georgia educational board, or excuse me, Board of Education was not having the foresight to think, oh, every school needs computer labs because that's where the future is going, there's not going to be computer labs.
But then this is the thing, Kate, and it sounds like what you're saying, and this is what I'm hearing, and I think Seval, you agree. Then the way the system is created is that the system is designed for some to be created as leaders and most to be created as followers, some to be created as creators, and some to be users.
That's exactly how it is created. That's exactly how it's created.
So if that is the case, then does that mean that if we in the African American community, in the minority community, if we want our situation to change in this society, we have to create a new paradigm where that a paradigm doesn't have such a negative impact on us. So maybe we do have to start our own schools so that at a minimum, our schools have what we see life is going. Because this is the thing. We either playing the part of life happening to us or we're making life happen. And I think for a very long time, we've always played the role of, you know, life is happening and then we show up as the help, so to speak. And not realizing that we can make life happen, right? We can do some things. We can go to where life is going, right? Think about it when you were a kid. Did you think that everything you wanted to do would be on the phone?
Actually, I did, and let me tell you why.
You're much younger than me. I'm talking about if you were my age.
Well, I knew we were going to be doing this before, I guarantee you, before the majority of before any of my peers in school, actually, because my parents made sure to expose me to, looked for opportunities, always looked for opportunities for me to get experience and, you know, experience technology and experience what's going, like the.
Okay, you muted yourself, Kay. Kay, you muted yourself. You muted yourself. Okay, I think Kay lost. Oh, there you go. Kay?
Oh, there you go. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, a call came through and it turned this on mute, I guess. But I knew that because of what my mind had been exposed to, let me just simplify it. I knew that this was going to be happening, that people were going to be regularly doing video calls. And that allowed me to, you know, as I grew older, that allowed me to make investments in this type of technology, that allowed me to make moves to be prepared for that coming transition, because my mind was exposed to the reality of, like, this is coming, like, we're making this technology, everyone's going to be making video calls in the near future.
Well, and I want to piggyback on something that you just said, right? Because you saw some things coming, that caused you to make some economic choices, right? Some investments, right? This is what I'm talking about. When you start to really do, you know, I call it self-education, right? When you start to really self-educate and start to be in the know and start to think about, okay, where is life kind of going, right? You know, evidently it sounds like for you, you sort of looked around and say, you know what, we're gonna be doing more video chatting. But you were saying that before we were actually doing more video chatting, right? And evidently you made investment choices based upon where you saw life going, right? Because the reality of it is, if all of us would have just bought $100 in Google back in the 90s, we'd all be rich, right? Off of $100 investment.
Or $200 in Bitcoin 10 years ago.
Exactly, right? But so that means that our focus,
or $1,000 in Bitcoin, I think if you bought it 10 years ago, it'd be like close to 7 mil.
Exactly. So that lets me know that we're not focusing right on the right things, right? Because if we were focusing more on where life is going, we can kind of play along with it.
And that goes back to that mental slavery. When I keep bringing up, like when we're talking about this, I keep thinking of the women that I met yesterday. The system, the construct is designed to keep them mentally engaged in their role and in their position and their, you know, their low status in society, their lack of mobility. They're not thinking about going out to vote and being a voice of change for the important legislation that affects their everyday lives, because by the system, their voice is not important. It doesn't matter. They are not they're not effective. And
but what if that applies to us as a group? What if what you just said about those women applies to certain groups? Not individuals.
We know it absolutely applies to marginalized groups, people. I don't even say people of color because I'm so tired of that term, but Blacks, Mexicans that have come here legally or illegally, whatever, or Mexican descendants that were born here, indigenous people that were already here. The system is designed to marginalize, or not marginalize, but to keep their voices out of the construct of things. We don't want them influencing how the laws are made, because if they do that, then it will make our way of life less convenient.
But if we know that, Kay, because I think I'm going back to, if we know that, then we can change that, right? Yeah. I'm not saying it's going to be easy.
If you're aware of the, if you're aware of the bullet, if you will, then you can dodge it
Okay.
or dislodge it, you know, depending on where you are in that. Well, actually, let's look at it this way, where you are in that pyramid, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You got a lot of people that are living in that base, still trying to figure out their basic needs of food, shelter, clothing. They're not thinking about self-actualization.
I agree with that. I agree with that. That's one of the things I like. Yeah.
You know, if we want to keep someone here, as in like them in the working class, and I'm not talking about like working at a law firm. I'm talking about the folks that bring up your groceries or the folks that clean your toilets. Then just keep them at a keep them so caught up, tied up in whatever mental cage that they're not ascending Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're not thinking about self-actualization. Someone thinking about self-actualization will be thinking about the laws that affect them, and they will be taking action towards making sure that they're fairly represented in the making of the laws that affect them. They'll be thinking about whether or not their school system is adequate, about what can they do to change that. So how do we, you know, surpass that, or transcend rather that victim mindset to victor? It's you know, it's an ascension through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I believe. It's someone who doesn't know where they're gonna get their next meal from. They're thinking about different stuff.
No, and
right?
I agree with you, Kate. I mean, I think that's what makes this conversation about the victim mentality, the such a necessary but difficult conversation to have when asked to how do we fix this problem, right? Because, do you agree, Javal?
Yes. Where do we go from there? Yes.
Where do we go from here? Because I'm just the thing, we can talk about how difficult it'll be and how hard it'll be, but if we say that it's a problem, we now have to come up with a solution. We can't keep focusing
I think
on.
we should look at models of other societies that, I mean, the United States is not the best country in the world. I have been researching other countries actually to move me and my child too, because this place is, it's just, I got no words. I don't know where to start. I mean, globally, if you look at other societies, the education system here as a whole sucks. The people's
the education. Let's be fair. Let's be fair.
subpar.
The educational system is stuck in. At one point in time, the way the educational system was top, right? Because it was built for an industrialized society. We're more of an informational society, right?
I don't think the United States educational system's ever been at the top, like top 2, 3. If I mean you got to look at, if you're building if your educational system starts out as a way to build slaves, I mean that's what the industrialized model is, right? Clock punchers. That's not an education system. That's just training. That's brainwashing.
But I agree with you, and that is part and parcel. I think part of where we're talking about that. The educational system, the model that we have now, it was created for an industrialized nation. We're kind of moving away from the industrialized nation. We're more of an informational nation. And more of a, you know, tapping into your creativity. You started talking about, you know, Maslow's self-actualization, right? And you can't get to actualizing yourself if you're just focusing on your basic needs being
Right.
met.
So, and circle
Hold
back.
on, wait a minute. I think Seval is trying to say something. What are you saying, Seval?
So what she's touching on is essential, because if someone can't meet their essential needs on a daily basis, then yeah, they're not focusing on any other aspect. They're just trying to make it day to day. So the biggest thing we have to look at is how can we see how racial and regional inequality affect economic opportunity. Those are the things we have to look at. And
Say that again. Racial, say that again.
how racial and regional inequality affect economic opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. Racial. That's a
I
great
mean, I
question.
think if you look at models of, and I'm not going to name them all because there's at least 12 solid ones out there that you can, all over the world, that you can look at. They take care of their citizens' basic needs. Nobody's worrying about a home, food on the table, and clothes,
Mhm.
because that is taken care of by the way that government was organized, the way that they are founded. They take care of everyone's basic needs, and you know, that in and of itself will drop your crime rates in this country. And
So
when you
it sounds like you're for a
ascend.
minimum. You're for a minimum base income.
Absolutely, it makes sense. It makes sense. If the United States is supposed to be the richest country in the world, but all our other numbers are down here, richest for what? Richest for who?
Okay, so let's we got this. I'm gonna have to put this podcast into like 3 segments because we done gone real long. Okay, so I want to go back to Seval's question. How racial and regional inequality affect economic opportunity? Because I actually think that question probably sums up the past 30 minutes of our conversation, right? And not that I don't think we were in disagreement. It's just that we all recognize that there's a problem. There's a problem in the quality of education made available to everyone, right? And that quality has been dependent upon economics based upon property values. But in actuality, as Seval pointed out, it's not just property values. It's a perpetuation of a division of superior, inferior, higher class, lower class, et cetera, right? And then those things are tied up to sort of the racial inequality, right? Or the regional inequality, where you live. Do you live in the suburbs versus do you live in a rural area? But to me, all of those problems are fixable if we're willing to make the changes to fix them. Or am I just being too optimistic?
Wow. Well,
Come on, give it.
I
Am I just
agree.
being, is it an impossible?
I agree. It's fixable. You
Because
know,
once you okay, if you're saying regional and racial inequalities affect economic opportunity, that's the problem. I don't think anybody will dispute that. Then we have to change that, the outcome of that by digging first deep. Okay, well, all right, let's look at racial inequality. Well, let's take the George Floyd situation and a whole host of other situations similar to George Floyd that has occurred, right? That's occurring because of racial inequalities. That's occurring because there was perpetuation of mentality about people who skin color is a little darker than yours, right? We gotta fix that, right? Regional inequalities, right? I grew up in Natchez, Mississippi. I'm sure the education that I got in Natchez, Mississippi probably isn't the same as an education that somebody grew up in that lives in the River Oaks in the Houston area, right? Because they probably, like your school, Kay, they probably had computers, right? Whereas my school didn't necessarily have computers. And if they did have computers, they had one for everybody to use. But those things are all fixable by just saying, okay, if school A and school B don't have, school A has computers and school B don't have computers, what do we need to do to give school B a computer or school A a computer? Either take some of the computers from the school that has computers, or go out there and buy the same amount of computers for that school A is going to need. Because we know we can print money. COVID proved that, right? They printed a ton of money in the past month and a half. So we can resolve these racial and regional inequalities and raise the economic bar for all people. We know we can do it. We just did it, really, with COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I think
About this, I don't think, I think there's no end to the discussion that we can have to solve the problems that we feel like that are there in America. Because you're right, Seval, there's systematic policies that are in place, I think, that to keep the divide. The stereotypes that work against, I agree with the stereotype. I mean, there are stereotypes that work to the disadvantage of not just our children, but to us as people across the board. And unfortunately, I think sometimes we perpetuate them too, against ourselves, right? And I don't know, it's just, so what's the solution? How? Because it sounds like you really, really put some thought into this, Seval, which is, one of the reasons for your organization, Black Lives Matter, Help Us.
Help us. The key word, help us.
Help
Not
us.
just be Black Lives Matter, because yes, we matter, but what are we doing to help us to become better at this and become de-symmetric and symmetized to this is normal. This is not normal.
Yeah.
We have to stop it. We got to be sick and tired of being sick and tired, basically.
Exactly.
We can't keep accepting this.
I agree with you. I agree with you. It's literally like, just in this discussion that we've just had, it's like we know what the problem is, but we've been systematized to believe that it has to be that way, right? And I keep telling people, okay, you do realize you created, not you specifically, but the system is created by people, which means it just needs people to change the system.
Yeah, and that's where you have the oppressors. It's actually composed by oppressors. So if you have someone that's oppressing you, they have to keep you oppressed to keep that dominance, to keep that authority. So that's how
you're willing to get that knowledge to change how you're seeing things and how you're interpreting things. You actually contribute to the very system that harms you. You actually help to perpetuate it.
correct.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And that's why I said there are so many different organizations. I don't discredit any organization that is for the people. Black Lives Matter, Help Us. I'm sure all their causes are good. But at the end of the day, we have to remember, for change, we have to educate. We have to do something different. We cannot keep going through the same patterns and the same things we've done in the past, because it leads us nowhere. At the end of all these protests, if we don't do something different, we're going to have the same results. So this time we have to take ownership and we have to have a different result.
Well, I always say, I get that we didn't cause necessarily the problem, but until we take responsibility and respond to it, we will just continue to perpetuate a problem that we have the authority and the power to solve, right? So we have to take responsibility. That doesn't mean that there's not somebody to blame. There's always somebody to blame, but the blame game doesn't get us to the new result that we want. So, I think I was watching Karen Hunter's show one day, and the title was, "Is this a moment or a movement?" Right? And I think that that's kind of what you're saying, Seval. We can protest all day. We can complain. We can point out the problems. We can ask all of the right questions. But if we're not willing to take the action that will precipitate the change that we want to have and see in our lives and in our communities around us, we're going to be right back playing that same role again, right? That's why when we were talking earlier, I asked, have we become comfortable in the role that we play in this society?
Yep.
So it's a lot. Well, okay, Seval, please let my audience know how they can connect with you or connect with your organization.
One way would be through our Facebook page, would be the Black Lives Matter Help Us. The other one would be our actual website, blackliveshelpus.org.
Okay.
And also through our phone number at 951-354-5066, or by our fax at 951-354-5016. Any of those means of communication, and definitely through your podcast, definitely by you giving the information out, you can reach out to me, let me know if anyone else needs any educational information. And even if someone wants to get the paperwork together for their city, their community, like I was saying, the senator's information, the mayor's information, and have those emergency numbers passed out, we'll be glad to show you an example of how we did it for our areas here, so that they can make those and get those out to the community, so you have those resources handy for you in the time of need. Hopefully we won't have to use them again, but have them readily available if you need
have them ready. Yeah. Hopefully we won't. I mean, hopefully this is definitely a time of a movement, and not just a momentary change. And so I totally agree with you. Any last words?
That's Black Lives Matter Help Us, right? It's
Black
Black
Lives
Lives Matter Help Us.org.
blacklivesmatterhelpus.org. So definitely connect. You might want to go on the website, read the information that they have on there, donate. It's for a good cause. And I agree that you have to change the knowledge and the information that's on the inside, because when you start to change that, you start to think, and even in the midst of a dire situation, you may say, you know what, I don't want to have a life like this anymore. And then you set out the plan to design the life that you would like to live. Kay, any last thoughts that you want to leave us with?
None of it'll be all that intelligible, because I've literally, without matcha green tea in the morning, my brain's last words, reinvest in our community. So if you have ascended Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you're all taken care of, and you've self-actualized, and you're the person you want to be, reinvest in your community, your dollars, your time, your knowledge, your wisdom, experiences. Just reinvest it in the community any way that you have available to you, and by any means necessary.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Well, as I promised on every episode, I was going to try my best to make sure that I wear a shirt that's made by a Black-owned company, and today I have continued that, and I am wearing a shirt that's designed by AE Enterprises, where they say is quality apparel, screen printing, and embroidery. Their website is www.aeglobalproducts.com. So that's www.aeglobalproducts.com. So check it out. I love my shirt. Nice little color, beautiful color on me.
Beautiful.
And so,
it brings out your complexion. I love it.
Thank you.
Really
and
good.
so thank you. So I have thoroughly enjoyed. This is like good girl conversations, and we could go further. We're gonna have to come back and talk about our these subjects again, because there's so many different trails we could have gone down, and such an awesome conversation. So thank you so much. Happy, what's today?
Today is
Wednesday.
Look,
Happy Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ashe, free thinkers. Ashe, may what you say manifest in your life today and every day. Ashe. Uh-oh, Sevel, are you frozen?